Losing is part of the MMA game. Aside from legends like Khabib or gangsters like Chael Sonnen, who retired undefeated and undisputed, every fighter knows the sting of defeat. While most athletes show humility in loss, congratulating their opponents on well-deserved victories, some let their egos get the best of them. These individuals refuse to acknowledge their losses, offering countless excuses, or even boldly claiming they never lost at all. Without further ado, let's dive into the 10 biggest sore losers in UFC history, who just couldn't let go of a defeat. There was a time when TJ Dillashaw was a dominant force in the UFC's bantamweight division, and clearly unaccustomed to losing. The American claimed the belt in 2014, after outclassing Renan Barão, but 2 years later he fell short on the judges' scorecards in a razor-close fight against Dominick Cruz. TJ insisted he had won and never fully accepted that Cruz was the better fighter that night. If you thought this was the peak of his salty behavior and defeat, you might have forgotten his reaction after the Henry Cejudo clash. Dillashaw had reclaimed the belt by demolishing his former training partner, Cody Garbrandt, and solidified his dominance with another brutal victory in their rematch. This set the stage for a super fight against flyweight great Henry Cejudo, the reigning champion of that division. But a big right hand from Triple C sent the unlucky challenger crashing to the canvas, and the follow-up assault forced the referee to step in and stop the fight. The stoppage didn't sit well with the bantamweight champ, who repeatedly blamed the referee for doing a terrible job, while refusing to acknowledge any mistakes he made as a fighter. Unfortunately, TJ was never the same after this loss, and to this day, he still hasn't admitted that he was defeated fair and square. Dillashaw wasn't the only bantamweight champion to blame a referee for their defeat. Dominick Cruz, widely regarded as one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time, also struggled to be humble in defeat, again against Henry Cejudo. It almost seems like Triple C has just enough power to force a referee stoppage, but not enough to knock his opponents out cold. 4 years before his clash with Cejudo, Dominick Cruz delivered one of the greatest comebacks in MMA history. After years of inactivity due to injuries, the Dominator returned in style and dethroned then-champ TJ Dillashaw. However, Cruz later lost the belt to Cody Garbrandt and was eventually given a chance to reclaim UFC gold in a fight against Henry Cejudo. This time, there was no fairy tale ending. Cejudo landed a devastating knee, and the subsequent onslaught destroyed any hope for a comeback. While it appeared Cruz was out, he got back to his feet after the stoppage to protest, but by then, it was too little, too late. After the loss, the former champ refused to accept the defeat and placed the blame squarely on referee Keith Peterson, claiming the stoppage was premature. Cruz even took things a step further, accusing the ref of smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. Cruz went on to win his next 2 fights, before Chito Vera crow-copped him into oblivion. He hasn't fought since. When Michael Bisping was given the chance to fight Luke Rockhold for the UFC belt, few people thought the Englishman had a shot at winning. After all, he took the fight on short notice and was up against one of the most accomplished middleweights of the time. Luke, a former Strikeforce champion, was a well-rounded fighter who could submit or knock out his opponents. By the time he was scheduled to face Bisping, the American was riding a 5-fight winning streak, having tamed elite fighters like Lyoto Machida and Chris Weidman along the way. The two had already fought once before, where Luke suffocated Bisping into submission with a guillotine choke. An overconfident Rockhold was unconcerned about fighting Bisping again. He entered the fight too relaxed, underestimating the danger his opponent posed. Bisping capitalized on Luke's cockiness, landing a devastating left hook from hell, one so clean it might have made even Alex Pereira envious. But the drama didn't end there. Luke, visibly salty and frustrated after losing to someone he considered an average bloke, didn't hold back during the post-fight press conference. Convinced the loss was a fluke, Rockhold told Bisping he wouldn't be champion for long. Over the years, the two have buried the hatchet. When Sean Strickland fought Israel Adesanya, he did the unthinkable, outstriking the striking maestro on the feet to secure a unanimous decision victory. Unfortunately for Sean, his reign as champion was short-lived. 4 months after the upset, the American faced rising contender Dricus du Plessis, a dangerous brawler known for rarely leaving fights in the judges' hands. The two engaged in a competitive 5-round battle, and the judges ultimately awarded the victory to du Plessis. While Strickland had the edge in volume, Dricus landed the bigger, cleaner shots. The fight boiled down to personal preference. Do you value volume punching or impactful strikes more? Some fans believed Strickland had done enough to win, and the American seized every opportunity to discredit Dricus's victory. Strickland relentlessly roasted du Plessis, demanding a rematch that, in his words, was inevitable to determine the better fighter. He insisted he had won the first encounter and was robbed by the judges. In the end, the UFC matchmakers couldn't resist revisiting this rivalry. Strickland and du Plessis are now set to settle their beef once and for all on February 9, 2025. Oh, and you know which other fighter blamed referees for his downfall? The one and only Colby Covington. Forget about Colby's recent struggles. There was a time when he was a wrestling powerhouse and a cardio machine who could go all day without tiring. However, he had the misfortune of competing in the same era as Kamaru Usman, who, alongside GSP, is regarded as one of the greatest welterweights of all time. The two first squared off on December 14, 2019, at UFC 245. From the opening bell, it was a violent dance with neither fighter willing to back down in what became a closely contested battle. But everything changed in the 5th and final round, when Kamaru unleashed an atomic right hand that sent Colby crashing to the canvas. The Nigerian Nightmare hurried to call the ambulance, but not for him, successfully defending his belt via a TKO victory. Covington, refusing to congratulate his opponent, stormed off the stage faster than an anchor dropping to the ocean floor. The American never stopped blaming referee Mark Goddard for what he claimed was a premature stoppage. He also criticized Goddard's officiating throughout the fight. Regardless, their second encounter saw Usman dominate the action, closing the heated rivalry with a convincing unanimous decision victory. During the early 2010s, Nick Diaz was one of the UFC's biggest stars and cash cows. Despite losing to Carlos Condit just a year earlier, Stockton's favorite son was still granted an opportunity to seize the welterweight crown, which belonged to George St. Pierre. Now, according to many, GSP is the MMA GOAT, and there's no shame in losing to him. However, that sentiment didn't sit well with Nick, who was dominated over 5 rounds and lost the fight via unanimous decision. But you know how the Diaz brothers are. They would never admit to being beaten fair and square. After some time, Nick started delving into conspiracy theories, claiming he lost the fight because he was poisoned. And no, he wasn't joking or trash-talking to push for a rematch. Nick genuinely believed he was drugged during that fight. He also accused GSP of being on steroids and threw out several other accusations, none of which pointed to him simply not performing at GSP's level. Since this bout, Nick has fought 2 more times, losing one and testing positive for marijuana metabolites in the other, which was subsequently ruled a no contest. When Sean O'Malley faced Marlon Chito Vera for the first time, he stepped into the octagon undefeated and, according to him, walked out mentally undefeated. Here's what happened. O'Malley injured his leg mid-fight, which severely hampered his performance and ultimately led to his first professional loss. But here's the thing. MMA is a brutal sport, and injuries during a fight are part of the game. Can you really blame Chito for capitalizing on the injured Sean and unloading a barrage of shots to secure the victory? Despite this, Sean never acknowledged the loss or gave Chito credit for the win. Instead, he doubled down on his stance, claiming he never truly lost and maintaining his mentally undefeated mindset. That mindset may have worked in his favor. It kept Sean focused and motivated to avenge what he considered a fluke loss. When they finally met for a rematch, O'Malley left no doubts, dominating Cheeto so convincingly that the judges might as well have clocked out early. Who could forget one of the greatest upsets in MMA history? Ronda Rousey was once the golden goose of the UFC, single-handedly bringing women's MMA into the spotlight and leading the charge for the creation of women's divisions in the organization. By the time she faced Holly Holm on November 14, 2015, Rowdy was undefeated with a flawless 12-0 record. She wasn't just winning, she was finishing her fights before the final bell, mostly relying on her signature weapon, the armbar. But success bred overconfidence. Ronda developed a false sense of invincibility, believing she could beat every woman in her division with one arm tied behind her back. Even though Holm was a decorated boxing champion, Rousey thought she could stand and trade dynamites with her. Well, that decision didn't age well. Holm sent Ronda to the Shadow Realm with a head kick for the ages, ending her reign in devastating fashion. Instead of facing the media and accepting her loss, the former champion let her bruised ego take over. She avoided the press entirely, covering her face in shame to hide from the cameras. It didn't stop there. Rousey's emotional reaction was on full display when she broke down in tears on live TV, even revealing that she'd briefly considered suicide after the loss. To this day, Ronda has never fully embraced defeat with grace. In her mind, she'll always remain the greatest female athlete of all time. When Paulo Costa challenged Israel Adesanya for the undisputed middleweight belt, it was a clash of the undefeated. Someone's O had to go. Costa was a vicious brawler with a PhD in violence, and everyone thought he'd give Adesanya a run for his money. The build-up to this fight was a story in itself. All the trash talk and insults only added fuel to the hype, and the stakes were high, with the loser forced to eat their words. Well, this bout turned out to be Adesanya's masterpiece, his own Mona Lisa, where he picked Costa apart with resounding low kicks before finishing him with a knockout in the second round. Due to all the bad blood leading up to this fight, Izzy seized the moment to disrespect the semi-unconscious Costa, which only escalated the hatred between the two. This move didn't sit well with Costa, who called Adesanya human trash for his actions. Paulo later claimed that something happened before the fight that compromised his performance. Eventually, he revealed that he drank an entire bottle of wine the night before the fight, as he struggled to sleep. That decision, he said, ultimately led to his defeat at the hands of Izzy. Well, what can be said? Next time, Paulo, maybe try some sleeping tea or pills instead of Alexander the Great's favorite drink. Conor McGregor was the kind of fighter who rarely gave excuses. Well, that all changed after facing Khabib. As it turned out, his foot was a balloon. When he fought Dustin Poirier for the third time, an unfortunate kick led to Conor breaking his leg. According to the Irishman, it was an illegitimate win for Dustin, as it was a doctor stoppage. And who can forget Yoel Romero's super inspirational speech about people paying pay-per-view after losing a unanimous decision to Israel Adesanya? It seems like every time Hill opens his mouth, he ends up shooting himself in the foot. On his journey to the UFC belt, Sweet Dreams came across as a humble guy, chasing his dream of becoming a champion. But everything changed after his devastating loss to Alex Pereira. The Brazilian unleashed his infamous left hand, sending Jamal straight to La La Land. However, losing to Pereira wasn't what made fans turn on Jamal Hill. Instead of accepting the defeat with grace, Hill found every excuse in the book to discredit Pereira's performance. From blaming the referee for disrupting his focus to claiming he could beat Alex 9 times out of 10, Jamal seemed unable to accept that he was beaten by the better man. His saltiness hit a new high recently when he confronted Pereira in a training room. The Brazilian, without hesitation, handed him gloves and accepted the challenge, only for Hill to chicken out. Whether he's intentionally trying to rile up fans or just genuinely delusional, Jamahal Hill has become one of the least likable fighters on the UFC roster today. And what about you, UFC fans? Who do you think is the biggest sore loser who ever fought in the UFC? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more MMA